That is, I am a Santa Claus for Christmas in the Park San Jose. So this is not because I think it's a wonderful tonsorial choice. I am not a biker. I am not itinerant. This is the way I have to look in another month when children come and ask me for toys. Brendan, on the other hand, plays Santa Claus, but he doesn't actually get into the role as significantly as I do. There we are. All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting us to speak today. Brendan, what's my favorite sound in the whole world? I like that, but I only like it after I hear the sound of my own voice. So you give me the opportunity to come in here and speak. I'm going to take it every single time. What we'll be doing today, I'm going to give you an overview of Toastmasters and what it's all about. But that's no fun. We're going to jump right into essentially a Toastmasters demonstration meeting. I'll discuss all of the roles. I'm going to give you assignments where you will have to do things against your will. We're going to see a prepared speech by Brendan. Then we're going to have an impromptu session. We call them table topics, where we will invite you up here off the cuff to answer a question in 1 to 2 minutes. That gives me time to write an evaluation of Brendan's speech. What's my favorite thing to do, Brendan?
Give me an evaluation.
I love to give him an evaluation. So you'll see what it's like. Toastmasters, one of the strengths of the program is that you get immediate feedback. We don't wait 6 months and tell you how you're doing on the job. Every time you do something, you're going to get some feedback in Toastmasters to help you grow. Then we'll receive a report from the functionaries who I assign to various roles during the meeting, and we'll finish with questions and answers. Any questions and answers before I begin? Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about history. You like history, you're humanists. Toastmasters began as a series of speaking clubs way back at the beginning of the previous century. Ralph Smedley was the director of education for YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association. He could see that men in his community needed some training on how to speak, but also how to run meetings effectively and work on committees. He decided he was going to do something about that. So he organized a little club where they could learn these skills in a social environment to have fun, and the men responded rather well. He named the group the Toastmasters Club. Back in those days, a Toastmaster was somebody who, quite obviously, was genial and gave nice toasts at the beginning of meals. The first unofficial Toastmasters meeting was held March 24th, 1905. Now, much like the meetings today, the participants would get up and give short speeches. Then the older members would give an evaluation on how well they thought they had done. The club was doing just great until Ralph Smedley got another job at a different YMCA. The moment he left, the club floundered without his leadership. He went on to Illinois, started a club, moved to San Jose, that club died. In San Jose, started a club, it flourished, he moved away, the club died. He realized that he needed to do something about this. So in his new role in Santa Ana, he sat down and he wrote 2 manuals, the Manual of Instructions and 10 Lessons in Public Speaking. This way he was able to send them to other organizations that wanted to start a Toastmasters club, so they would have rules and they would have the leadership guidance they needed to keep the club going without Ralph Smedley himself actually being there. On October 25th, 1928, he got the copyrights to the publications and he trademarked the name Toastmasters Club. In 1930, there were actually 30 Toastmasters clubs, and one of them was in British Columbia. So he had to change the name of the organization to Toastmasters International. I mean, it was all the way across the border. In 1970, just to show that we're not a bunch of old fogies, Helen Blanchard was the first female member allowed into the Toastmasters Club. In 1985, she became the first female international president of Toastmasters. Today, Toastmasters has 358,000 members in 16,800 clubs in 143 countries. We're really international at this point. Now, when I joined just 12 years ago, believe it or not, Toastmasters was still mostly run by old white guys with beards. We have seen a huge demographic shift just in the past decade. Now we're really serving a demographic group that is young, diverse professionals, most of whom do not have English as their first language. And so our organization has had to change to keep up with these vibrant new members. For most of our history, there were two education tracks. The communication track, where you would work on speaking skills. As you got into more advanced manuals, you might learn about speaking humorously or doing technical presentations. The other track was focused on leadership, first at the club level, then at higher levels in the district and internationally. What they've done now, because it is the new millennium, we've gone online with something called Pathways. And instead of having two divergent tracks, we study our leadership and communication skills at the same time by following particular paths. For example, presentation mastery, visionary leadership, effective coaching, engaging humor, and persuasive influence. Now, when I joined Toastmasters, it was primarily to practice my public speaking. I was surprised to find that I was drawn into being a district officer. I will tell you a quick story. I actually wanted to be in a speech contest for our local area, and I couldn't find the information. I tried to find the area director, couldn't get a hold of her. Finally, I got a hold of the division director, one level higher. She told me how to get to the contest. I went. I happened to win. But after the contest, I said, how do you get to be one of these area directors? I don't want other people to have to go through what I just went through. They said, essentially, you raise your hand. Okay, so I raised my hand. So I became the area director candidate. But when I went to the conference, it turned out we didn't have a division director candidate, one level higher. So I said, well, I don't know how to do that either. And I became the division director my first year. The next year, I decided, you know what, I'm going to try and be one of the top 3 leaders. And I was going to run for that third position. But the person at the third position decided not to run for the second position. So my third year in Toastmasters, I was the second highest leader in the district. And as I began my 4th year in Toastmasters, I became a district director. Why? Because somebody needed to do it. So I got the opportunity to help 3,000 people in 150 clubs in the greater Bay Area, all the way up to Eureka, to learn their public speaking and leadership skills. This is a club that absolutely changes people's lives. Imagine someone who has difficulty communicating in English trying to be heard in a business meeting, or parents who are struggling to talk with teenagers in the new era of social media. We work with people on these communication skills and give them skills that not only apply to Toastmasters, but apply outside of Toastmasters in every aspect of their life. It costs about the same price as a cup of coffee, not a latte, a cup of coffee a week to belong to Toastmasters. If this were a pyramid scheme, if it were liquid soap that we were selling here, I wouldn't feel good about myself. But what we're selling at Toastmasters is a way for everybody to continue to grow throughout their lives. The 4 core values of Toastmasters are integrity, service, respect, and excellence. And putting these values into my daily life is one of the greatest things that I've earned through my participation in Toastmasters. Now I'd like to have some fun with a Toastmasters demo meeting, because it seems like we're really serious here, but the fact is, if you're not having fun, it's not Toastmasters. Okay? So the first thing we have to do, if you look at your agenda, this is why we seem serious. You notice we've got the times down to the minute. Obviously, we're a little loosey-goosey with this, but on the other hand, we value people's time in Toastmasters. So if we say we're going to start on time, we will start on time. If we're going to be finished at 12:15, we will finish at 12:15. Our members have lives. They've got jobs. So we want to start and keep to a crisp agenda. That way we always achieve everything in a meeting that we say we're going to achieve. Many people tell us that the only reason they joined the Toastmasters Club is because it started and ended on time. So you keep me on time today. Now, these are the roles I'm going to ask you to help us out with. The first one is called the awe counter. You may notice, now that I pointed out, I don't say you know, like, Before I joined Toastmasters, was my favorite go-to. I was so bad with between my sentences. One of my subordinates, when I was working at Oracle, would pretend to play the guitar every time I said So I'd say, before we get started, and he'd go, I just need to tell you that next week we have to, that helped. It really helped. But what we do, not to punish people or to embarrass them, is count the number of times you say or like. And getting that count at the end of the meeting is all it takes to make it obvious to yourself, and then you don't do it anymore. It takes about 6 weeks to go away completely. Now, is there a meticulous person who would like to count the number of times they hear and so, like, you know, but, and, long pause, or any other filler word that you might hear? Jeff, I could see that you were the man for the job. Oh, and look at this. We have a pen ready for you. Thank you so much. I should have brought pens. Also fun is the grammarian. Now, the grammarian pays attention to faux pas in your speech, but also looks for gems. We call them gems and germs. So if you hear somebody say something that's particularly eloquent, then you'll want to make a note of that. So you just jot down their name. If they make a grammatical error, you can remind them about that. And if you have, again, if you hear something particularly nice, that's the thing that I like to catch. Anybody want to be a grammarian for the meeting today? There we go. Herman, thank you. And the most important role, because I said we stick to time, is the timer. The timer will make sure that I stay on time, which is probably the most difficult thing. Is it not, Brendan?
Yes, indeed.
Shut up, Brendan. Thank you. So the way the timing role works, Brendan will be speaking for 5 to 7 minutes. I've got these lovely cards. At the 5-minute mark, you show the green card. At the 6-minute mark, you show yellow. At the 7-minute mark, you show the red, and you just keep it up, even though Brendan will go on and on and on, 8, 9, 12 minutes. No. You hold the red card, and you don't indicate when he's gone past his time. He actually has up to 7.5 minutes to speak. Now, when we do the table topics, those are short speeches. We'll ask you to hold up the green card at 1 minute, the yellow card at 1.5 minutes, and the red card at 2 minutes. Okay, you're laughing. Actually, can I ask you to come up here to be the timer? No? Okay. Okay. Oh, sure. And you can actually do it from the back of the room if you'd prefer. Yeah. I'm going to give you this timing sheet. Yeah, you get to keep that, yeah. And on the back of it, you'll see that there's a timing for the evaluation. I'll be evaluating Brendan's speech. That will go 2 to 3 minutes. So you show at 2 minutes, the green card, at 2.5 minutes, the yellow, and at 3 minutes, the red card. And you've got to show him because, man, I'll just keep going. Yeah, he's terrible. We also need a general evaluator. General evaluator gives us an overall impression of what he or she thought about the meeting. Would anybody just like to keep notes and tell us what you thought of our demo meeting today? All right, thank you so much. One of the things about Toastmasters, we don't let people be shy, particularly if it's inconvenient for me. There, we've assigned all of our roles. I think it's time to hear an actual speech from an actual Toastmaster. Would you enjoy that? Yes. I guarantee you will. This is Mr. Brendan Murphy. He's my brother from another mother. Oh, and more than that, he is a fine speaker, a fine person. Despite the fact that he is a Catholic, he does someday hope to be a real live boy. So I think that definitely qualifies him to speak to humanists today. Please welcome Brendan Murphy.
Jim Collins, one of my favorite authors, wrote a book, From Good to Great. And in that he starts with this quote, "Good is the enemy of great."
Mute is the enemy of sound.
Good is the enemy of great. So, Mr. Toastmasters, any fellow Toastmasters in the audience, especially guests, the question is, are you good or are you great? Now, full disclosure here, this is a sales pitch. I'm not going to try and hide this. The purpose of my speaking here today is to encourage you to join Toastmasters and to dive into the Toastmasters educational program. And I'm giving this sales pitch because I believe in Toastmasters. Over my 22 years in the program, I have seen several successful stories of what Toastmasters can do for individuals. And because Dennis only gave me 5 to 7 minutes, I'm going to limit those stories to 3 about Nicole, Janice, and Paul. Now, Nicole was an employee, a project manager at AT&T. She was extremely bright, high IQ, but she was also an introvert. And one day her boss came to her and said, "You need to go to Toastmasters." The problem was Nicole's intelligence was hidden by her reluctance to speak up when required by her job. And so Nicole was sharp enough to realize she had to go to Toastmasters. She joined, but Nicole was highly intelligent. She figured out a way, the little sneak, to avoid speaking in the club meetings. Until 3 months after she joined, I was the table topics master, and I called on her to give an impromptu speech. The glare she gave me, I still remember. But the good news is that broke the dam, and she started speaking in the club. And then she started speaking as a project manager. And she not only kept her job, she got the highest rating possible. Nicole was forced into Toastmasters, and it helped her move from good to great. But there's other people who have to be persuaded more gently, and Janice was one of those. Janice was a single mother working a full-time job, and she had a friend who said, "Come on down to Toastmasters this Wednesday." And she said, "Are you nuts? I don't have any time for anything else. Got my kids and my job, and that's it." For 5 years, that friend kept on inviting her to Toastmasters again and again. Finally, after 5 years, Janet said, "Tell you what, if you promise to shut up," I don't think she said it quite so nicely, "if you promise to shut up, I'm going to go to this meeting and you'll never say Toastmasters to me again." The friend said, "Deal." Janice went to that meeting. She had a blast. She enjoyed it so much, she decided to join because it energized her in the middle of the week. So Janice signed up and casually got into the Toastmasters educational program. And when she achieved her first award for all of her work, she casually submitted the application and casually mentioned the address of her boss. Her boss got this big letter from Toastmasters International talking about what Janice had achieved. And the boss was so impressed that he gave Janice a little raise. Now Janice was less casual about Toastmasters and more motivated. And indeed, she kept on getting achievement after achievement in the Toastmasters educational program, and her boss kept on adding in raises and promotions. The only problem for Janice with Toastmasters is that it took her 5 years to join the program because it really helped her move from good to great in her career. Now, Nicole and Janice benefited from the Toastmasters educational program in their careers. And that program helps us develop our communication and leadership skills. These skills are sometimes called soft skills, but that's not a pejorative. These skills are vital for working with human beings. And it's foundational in whatever you do, whether professionally or personally. And I know this because of the story of Paul. Paul joined our club because he wanted to teach Bible study at his church. And he was terrible at public speaking, so his pastor gave him a commandment: thou shalt join Toastmasters. Paul went into Toastmasters, and when you join Toastmasters, you give an icebreaker speech. And you just talk about yourself for 4 to 6 minutes. And when Paul spoke, I was afraid I was going to see the first person who could ever flunk out of Toastmasters. Paul's original language was Mandarin Chinese. His second language was Mandarin English, and he was basically incomprehensible. But he kept on with the program. He had a goal, and he wanted to get there. And 10 months later, he got up to give his final speech to our group because Toastmasters had empowered him to speak and lead that Bible study. It was at the same time of the club, but he wanted to give us one final story. Story I will never forget, because not only was it beautiful, it was told beautifully and clearly. It was about a cat he found while his parents were jailed during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. His grandparents said, "You can't have the cat. We don't have the food for it." But Paul found a connection, gave that cat some of his food, and found a friend. That story reminds me of the connection we all get from being together in Toastmasters on a weekly basis, and how Toastmasters can connect you to your goals. So, fellow future Toastmasters, Mr. Toastmasters, welcome guests, I encourage you to go from good to great. I encourage you to join Toastmasters. Mr. Toastmaster.
Two things I always need to point out. You may notice we clap a lot in Toastmasters. We do that on purpose. So every time anybody gets up, anytime anybody sits down, you applaud. Now, this is just like in kindergarten. If anybody begins to applaud, everybody has to join in enthusiastically for 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds. But we don't want the 1980s teen comedy sort of applause. So if you see me start to applaud, you're all going to jump in very enthusiastically. Is that correct? There. I had to wait for Herman. Alfred, you're a tough cookie. The other thing you may notice, every time someone comes up here, we shake hands. We do that on purpose because we are turning control of the podium over to that person. When you come up here, I'm going to shake your hand. The person who is taking control steps forward. The person who is relinquishing control walks around the back. Taking control, step forward. Relinquishing control, go around the back. Otherwise, you collide with each other. I'm going to turn the podium over to Brendan now. He's going to torture all of you with his brilliant table topics questions. Watch the handshake.
Once again, a big round of applause for Dennis Dawson. Only because he loves it so much. All right, so this is impromptu speaking. There's 3 parts to a Toastmasters meeting, as Dennis described. Prepared speaking, impromptu speaking, and evaluation speaking. And impromptu speaking is extremely vital no matter where you go. How we practice it here in Toastmasters is we ask you to give a mini speech in response to the table topic which I will provide. I'm not asking you just to answer the question, because most of these topics you could answer very well in 15 to 30 seconds. I'm asking you to give a mini speech with a beginning, middle, and end. Think of them as stories are usually the best way to respond to these table topics, or you can do a mini kind of essay with a thesis, body, and conclusion. Either way, have fun with this, but think, I want a mini speech. Now, once again, our timing is for you to speak from 1 to 2 minutes. The goal is to speak a minimum of 1 minute, and so don't stop speaking until that green card comes up at the back. And then at 1.5 minutes, you will see the yellow card from our timer in the back. Keep on going, or you can start winding it down. And then what does this mean? The red card means hurry up and shut up, because you have 30 seconds to go there. We ask you to do that mini speech between 1 minute and 2.5 minutes. Don't forget, have a structure, have a response, and this is a very powerful thing. What I found most beneficial about this activity is that when you go to parties and people ask for a question of you, if you speak for about 2 minutes, you're fine. If you speak more than 2 minutes, you're not fine. And if you speak under 30 seconds, people will just say, well, obviously you don't want to talk to me. Goodbye. So we will bring people up. I have some volunteers here. The rule with non-Toastmasters is you can tell me no. I encourage you to come up and try it, because it's all safety here and we'll have fun. As a way of encouraging, I need a little something from you. When somebody comes up here, gives a table topic, and they may be nervous, or whatever, or may not have a good time, or they may have a great time, I need you to give them a huge affirmation. So let's start with some applause. Give me some nice applause. Then give me some hollering. Hollering. Yeah, there we go. Fantastic. And now give me some stomping. All right, let's practice that again. Woo. Yeah, all right. Okay, well, we'll have to work on the woo and the who, but we got the stomping and the applause along the way. Can we get Matt up here for our first table topics? Give him a big hand, a hoot, a holler, and a stomp. All right, Matt, once again, I'm going to hand you the microphone after I give you the topic. You ready to go? Okay, impress this esteemed audience by telling us the tale, the story of how you got into videography.
Okay, how I got into videography. Is the mic working? Okay. Back in the day, I was in high school, and my parents were decided that I needed a job. I needed the classic summer job that's terrible, that everybody hates to do, right? That's, back-breaking work all day for however long on the weekends. So I didn't really have any particular interests that were going to go in that direction, but strangely enough, my sister was really into horses. So you're probably wondering how horses have to do with videography. And basically what would happen she would go to these horse shows and go and jump jumps and run around. I don't know what they do in the field and stuff with the horses, but there's companies that would go to these horse shows and video the horses jumping over jumps. And that's basically my mom found out about it. She sent me to the owner of the company and said, hey, here's somebody who will work for you and will take your money and do great stuff. So that's how I kind of got into it. And from there, through high school and through college on the weekends, I would end up driving around all over the southeast to all these horse shows and video them, the horses jumping over jumps. It'd be at least 8 hours a day, and then sometimes it would go Saturday and Sunday, and then I'd have to drive back really late at night and go to class on Monday again, which was always fun. So that's how I kind of got into it. And from there, I was interested in cameras, and I got into actually making short films and videos. And from there, that's how it happened. So that's my story.
Once again, a big hand for Matt doing it, our first victim of the day. My next victim is Helen. A big hoot and holler for Helen. Come on up, Helen. All right. Woo. All right, Helen, I hope this is an easy one for you. Once again, I'll hand you the microphone after I give you the question. We're going for 1 to 2 minutes, at least till that green card comes up. Tell us about your favorite teacher and the story of your class with that favorite teacher.
Well, I think my favorite teacher was in high school, and even though she was not familiar with the Bay Area, it was kind of funny when we were reading a book about some guy who went to the racetrack in Belmont, New York, and she thought it was talking about Belmont and San Mateo. I don't think I corrected her, somebody else did. But I really appreciated that she was able to take that in and not feel that she'd failed in her teaching. But also, she took a small group of students, including me, to a play at Stanford, and then we had lunch at her house, and it was very appealing. But I really appreciated her for the way she taught, generally.
Good job. No, you showed us all the time. Fantastic. Yeah, I know. Thank you so much, Helen, for jumping up and doing a good job up there. I always like to pick on people in the front row. So, Bob, how about you? Come on down. Ready? Yeah, come on up. Come on up. We'll give him some. You don't want to do it?
I will speak to you later.
Later? About your problems. All right, Bob, we'll get you later. Fantastic. The next one I have is Senna. All right, come on down, Senna. Woo. So, Senna, appreciate you. Saw you setting up there today. So, sounds like you were an expert on potlucks. So, can you tell this august audience what are the 5 best potluck items to bring to any potluck?
Well, we do a lot of potlucks in the Humanists, and they're either special or they're the regular one, and they're sort of different. But the most important thing for a regular potluck is whatever. A main dish is the main thing, because we always do the sweets and things, and what we need is main dishes. We need somebody any person who's willing to donate a potluck, a main dish once a month. We still need people like that. A good attitude, a supportive attitude, is the second important thing to bring. Not to rush the table before we're finished setting up. It's very, very disturbing when that happens, and it happens almost every time. So that was why I asked at the beginning to please wait until either Alex or I announces it, because sometimes other people announce it. And we're not ready yet, but they just step in and say, well, you must be ready by now. It's 12:30. You can't have another 2 minutes. Let's see, we need another one. The third thing, a helpful attitude. If you could help us carry in all that car full of stuff that we bring every time, and help us carry it all away, and help us come and slice bread or whatever, help set up. That's the third thing. 2 more. Not to be too picky. We're doing the best we can, and we know it isn't perfect, and we usually forget something to bring. And one person last Sunday, we forgot to bring the plates and napkins, and she went out and bought them and brought them in. Now that's the kind of team spirit that really makes it go. I'm supposed to stop. Okay, I didn't ever get to the 5th one, but you can manage to pick up something yourself, and I know you could do that.
done. Thank you so much. A good hand, give some stomp, some hootin', the hollering for Senna. Woo-hoo! All right.
Brendan.
Next up is Alex. Alex, come on down. Fantastic. Big hand for Alex, looking sharp. Hooper holler, nice tie. So Alex, this is kind of a time to let you embarrass yourself in front of everybody if you so choose every day. So can you tell us some times when you felt like you failed in public speaking?
No. Well, specific incidences are kind of hard to come by. There's so many. But I suppose the thing I run into is when I'm speaking, and usually I rush through a speech. I tend to look over what I've got to say, and I feel so good when I'm done and can walk away that I've generally missed something important. For instance, this morning I forgot to tell you all to silence your cell phones. Fortunately, no one got a call while we were conducting this forum. So that was not if it had rang, that would have been a failure. What else? Right now, there are things I've avoided. I have not gotten anyone's name wrong. How am I doing? Oh, I can stop now. Well, there we go. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much. As a reminder, public speaking is different. Man, you ready to go? Steve, you want to give it a shot? Yeah. Come on down. All right, a big hand for Steve. Coming on down. Whew. All right, Steve, in 1 to 2 minutes, can you tell us your life story?
Well, I started out as a child, a short adult, and I was born in San Francisco, and I have about every 10 years, I've moved about 10 miles, so I'm slowly working my way down the peninsula, and I'll probably end up in Milpitas living down by the river in Chris Farley. Anyway, I went to Catholic school for a while, and they beat God into us. We learned a lot. Let's see. Oh, what's the topic? My whole life story. Yeah. All I know is what Carl Langotti's taught me. He was mentioned several times in the last talk, and no, Carl's a great guy. It's into sports. Boy, I can't cover all of this. Star Trek, baseball, and my dad played catch with me, and I always, I miss my dad, to be honest with you. He just was a big force in my life. I'd hear a new record and say, Dad, you got to come here. This is a new Woody Herman record. So we're both into jazz. And I miss him because that's part of my growing up is listening to music and sharing it with my dad, and sports. Sometimes that's all we had in common to talk about was sports, even though it wasn't the most important thing in the world. I miss my family. That's part of how I was growing up and what I was taught. Anyway, I think I'm about out of time. I'm glad you all came and catch me and vote for me in the coming election. I'm one of the Democrats, one of the many Democrats that's running for office. And I live down by the river in a van. Thank you.
1 to 2 minutes, Steve did that very nicely. There we go. That's right. We gave the man a mic. Looks like he's ready to come back up here. Thank you, Steve, for jumping in. And that's the whole advantage of this. You get up here in this room and you fumble, mumble, stumble. It doesn't matter. We applaud anyway. We hoot, we holler, we stomp. Great, because you faced a great fear. Now, when you're a prepared speaker, you get a chance, you feel a little more comfortable because you're prepared. But when you come up and do it impromptu and you get a question right here and you have to think on your feet, it is risky and there's a high amount of failure. We celebrate not the success per se. We celebrate the attempt. You get up here, you handled it, you did your best, and you grow from the process. Because in this Toastmasters room, and I'm assuming these guys are starting a club today, right? In this Toastmasters room, it's not about being successful in here. It's about being successful after you leave this room. And that's what the key is. Come up, try, fail in here, succeed out there. And who wants to be our next failure and or success? Who's ready to go? Anybody? Come on down. Fantastic. All right. The questions are getting easier, so it's going to be very good. And what's your name? Ray, fantastic. Once again, Ray, thank you so much for jumping up. Tell us about your favorite movie or TV show.
My favorite movie was a very long time ago. When I was a child, I watched a lot of Disney movies, and one in particular I'll never forget. The movie was Toby Tyler. Toby Tyler was an orphan and kind of taken in by an aunt and uncle and didn't really get treated that well. And the circus came to town. And he wanted to go to the circus, and I may not be remembering this totally right. It was a long time ago. This movie is not out there on DVDs. It's kind of locked away in the Disney vaults. But he went to the circus and snuck in and decided to join the circus. And he helped around, cleaning up after the animals and doing odd jobs. And he finally became a performer. And he wanted to get out there and act with the other performers. And there was this young girl about his age that he pretty much fell in love with. And they were doing horseback riding, and finally the circus came back around to his hometown, and his aunt and uncle watched him perform, and it was just a very happy story that I will never forget. Thank you.
Well done, sir. Thank you so much. Once again, a big hand for Ray. All righty. Yeah, well, I'm envious of his voice, so I wasn't going to mention that. But no, great voice. Thank you so much, Ray, and appreciate it. I think we have time for one more, and this, once again, is another easy one. Who wants an easy one? Yeah, don't all jump at once. Ring, ring, ring. Yeah, come on down. Fantastic. Woo. Thank you so much, Dana. Yeah, okay. All right, Dana, thank you jumping up for being our 7th Table Topics respondent today. And I want to ask about the music that you remember from your childhood and teenage years.
What a great topic. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? I grew up in a musical family, you might say. My mother was Canadian, and her father was a fiddler, and they had a band that traveled around in Canada and played for dances. And many of them came down to the United States and subsequently went on to play with big bands or have a music store or whatever. But what I remember the most is that we used to go out to my grandmother's house outside of St. Paul, Minnesota, in Rosemount, and all the family would get together and bring their fiddles and whatever instrument they were going to play. And well, the men would actually play poker and drink whiskey for a while after dinner. And then they would clear away all the chairs and tables. And it was just it just went on for years. My Uncle Arthur would play his fiddle. My grandfather would play his fiddle. My Aunt Violet would play the piano. My Uncle Bud would play the accordion. And the adults and children would dance. And they would like keep playing until like 2 o'clock in the morning, and all the kids fell asleep on the bed. And this went on like every 2 weeks for the whole time I was growing up. And so we were expected to perform at family gatherings, to play some musical instrument usually, or sing a song. And I think it was sort of like the ceilidhs that they have in like Ireland and some of those countries where they routinely expect people to perform spontaneously at any time, you know. And so it was kind of good training, I guess, in a way. And I really look back on that time as really wonderful. And so thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dana. A big hoot and holler for her, stomping, dancing, singing. And I want to thank everybody who jumped in today. First time you did it, you guys did great. And once again, keep that applause going for Matt, Helen, Santa, Alex, Stan, Ray, and Dana. Big hoot and holler for all of them. And even more applause for the man, Dennis Dawson.
You made my job so easy today. You'll notice that we're back on time at this point. If there's extra time, we have time for more table topics. And I appreciate your making it so that I didn't have to do too much work today. This is the point where we will have an evaluation of Brendan's speech. One thing about Toastmasters is there are no teachers. This is a self-education program. You're given the materials, you fulfill the requirements of the lesson, and you're given feedback. Learning is up to you. There are, again, no experts, no teachers. What we do is we tell people what we see and what we hear and what we feel as they're speaking. I don't tell Brendan, you didn't do this. I say, I noticed that you paced a little bit. I don't judge what he does. I tell him what I observed. Now, what's nice about that, if you're brand new to Toastmasters, or you've been in Toastmasters for 12 years, you can always say what I saw, what I heard, and what I felt, and it's always valuable information. So Brendan, first thing I want to say is I really appreciate your great vocal variety. Do you notice that he goes up and down the scale? He doesn't just talk in 3 tones the way people typically do. He uses great dynamism, so that sometimes he gets really enthusiastic, and then sometimes he's going to quiet down and take it down to be sure that he's infusing everything he says with real meaning. I liked your use of gestures while you were holding the microphone as well. That's kind of a difficult trick. Usually we'd like to be able to use both hands. We encourage people to mix it up, not always do 2 gestures together like a marionette this way. So he was able to use his left hand effectively and still keep the microphone in place. I appreciated that. What I didn't like as much, you have a tendency to pace back and forth. And I am surprised at that. And this is something that I noticed in Brendan today. One of the things we encourage is to use the stage effectively. And walk over, talk to someone, and when you have a new point, you'll come over and you'll look somebody in the eye, complete that thought, and move on to another place and talk to someone else. But we don't sort of pace while we're talking. And by the way, when you look somebody in the eye, you just do it for 10 seconds. You don't keep going, otherwise it gets a little creepy, doesn't it? You could have been a little more sneaky about the sales pitch. We'll have to talk about that. No, I think that's good. It's good to let you know, yes, we're up here to promote Toastmasters without beating you over the head. I think it's fun to do. Your joke about Mandarin English is funny if you speak Mandarin. I'm not so sure it is something that we want to hear from old white guys. But now I'm going to complete my sandwich. You notice I started with a couple of things that I liked about Brendan's speech. I moved on to some places he could improve, but I always finish with what I liked best. What I liked best about Brendan's speech today was his use of stories. Brendan, people buy on
Emotion,
but then they,
justify with fact.
that's right. He loves it when he gets to say that. People buy on emotion, they justify their decisions with facts. What evokes an emotion in an audience? A great story. So if you want to reach people, you need to be a storyteller. He chose 3 points that he wanted to make and found the stories that would enable him to make them most effectively. And this is why Brendan is a distinguished Toastmaster. I always appreciate it when you get up and speak. I appreciate you coming and helping me out today. Thank you for a really inspirational speech. Now we're ready to hear how well we have done over the course of the meeting. I would like to call upon, is our microphone handy? Yes, our counter. There, it's Jeff. There he is. Jeff, would you speak into the microphone and tell us how we did on our filler words?
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to say that when you're counting ums and ahs, you often miss what they're actually saying because... but here's what I got anyway. Dennis, I counted 1 ah from you.
No! Okay.
I wasn't...
They're all examples. I didn't hear a single one where you were trying to make a point about
Yeah, there's legitimate ums and ahs, and then there are ones that are inserted without reason.
Illegitimate, that's usually me.
Brendan, I didn't count any filler words. Matt, I counted 2 likes, but nothing else. Helen, I found no filler words in her talk. Senna had 1 that I counted. And then Alex, I counted 5 ums or ahs. And Steve, I got 5 ums and, no, 5 ahs and 2 ums and 1 you know, and 1 and, no, 3 ands. Ray, I got 1 you know and 5 ands. And Dana, I got 4 ums and ahs, 1 and so, 1 like, and 3 ands that were extraneous.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah, Bob, you wanted to say something? Bob? Hi, you wanted to say something?
What?
There you are.
Well, this is very interesting. This is very interesting because I would like to give a perspective from somebody who is very deaf.
All right.
Now, the first thing the deaf people are interested in is the pronunciations. And that is very important. The second is the rate of speaking. The third is the volume. And for example, Carl back here is the first one I've ever understood speaking on bullshit, which happens to be one of my favorite topics. But I would like to point out that one of our problems as deaf people is that most people speak too fast, like on the TV. I do not understand often a word they say. Secondly, as an example of how it can work is that we follow some of these documentaries. What they do is hire somebody who's a professional narrator. And I can understand them without my hearing aids to tell you that it can be done. And I don't want to lay it on you guys think only of the deaf people. For example, for our TV, Marge and I have to have the thing on 100% to give you some appreciation of how it is when you cannot hear. Now, a normal person at our house the other day came by, we had the man and about blasted him out. So he cut the thing down to probably about 5% of the 100 to give you some appreciation of this. But again, the main problem is enunciation and speed of speaking. Now, most women, hold your pants on for a bit. Carl, you're the expert. Now, the only ones, right now, the best talk I just heard was Dana and Blue Shirt. I could understand them completely because they spoke slowly and enunciated very well. And so that's my hope. Now, for instance, you might give a joke. Everybody else laughs. I don't know what the hell you said. God has spoken.
That's right. And let's be very clear, deaf people are normal people.
Bullshit.
We've all got our problems. I eat my prunes. I wanted to point something out that Jeff actually said. Jeff was talking about what we call the Toastmasters trap. I happen to be a fan of Barack Obama. He is a brilliant speaker when he has the teleprompter. But at a press conference, he's got the going on really horribly. If I get stuck in the Toastmasters trap, I'm sitting there, listen to those filler words, Barack Obama, and I'm not listening to the content of what he's saying. So we have to be careful about that and be sure that we're listening to what's being said, even if they are not a perfect Toastmasters example. We have a grammarian. That was Herman, is that correct?
Yes.
And would you like to give us a report of the gems and germs you heard today?
There were absolutely no serious grammatical errors. The closest it came to a grammatical error was when Alex was referring to forgetting to tell you to turn off your cell phones. He said, if it had rang. And it should be, if it had rung. Okay? Not very important. There are many other mistakes that people make. They use last for latest. Can be very embarrassing sometime. Reminds me of a friend of mine who wrote many technical books, which he forced his high school teenagers to read until one day at dinner, and they hated it. One day at dinner, he turned to his teenage son and said, "Have you read my last book?" And the son said, "I certainly hope so."
Couldn't understand the word he said.
And how was our timing today, Carl?
Yeah, everybody, this is me, everyone actually either hit or stopped short, so it was fine. Nobody went over 30 seconds over the time, so it really worked out well.
Fantastic. And I recruited a general evaluator who's going to give us the opinion of what you thought of this demonstration meeting today.
I liked it.
That's good. I like it too.
We do like to hear concision, but then again, we want something to grow with. So can you give us anything that you would think we could improve upon in case we get a chance to do this again?
One thing I noticed was laughing somewhat artificially. And I can see how that can be a useful technique in some situations, but it can also undermine sincerity.
No, you're right.
Okay. And otherwise, unlike the ah counter, I was taking notes on the substance and missed a lot of the technique. So. I don't have anything else to add.
Oh, okay.
All right.
I want to thank everybody for contributing to the meeting. We got a lot of people up here, a lot of people speaking. We're going to end the meeting at this point, and then we'll move on to questions and answers. At this point, our Toastmasters demo meeting is adjourned. Now, Brendan has...
Yeah, so raise your hand and I will bring the mic to you.
I enjoyed this very much. About 15 years ago, I'm kind of a shy person. About 15 years ago, I decided to go to Toastmasters because I knew somebody that had done it, and she really improved her speaking. And I went to the group that she belonged to, and everybody was such a good speaker in the group that, frankly, I was terrified. I went about 4 times, and I just couldn't go back. So then I got the idea that I would try another group, and the same thing happened. This was down in the peninsula, this was in this area here. So what do you do when something like that happens?
You can start first.
Yeah. Thank you, Dennis, for that. The Toastmasters educational program is very effective. And when you join a club that has a lot of experienced members, I believe they will show that, and they will be very good at what they do. The key thing is to look for a mentor, or in this case, is to join a club that's just starting. Let's say if this group said, let's start our own Toastmasters club, then everybody would be at a similar level, and it'd be easy to join and not feel intimidated. But if that doesn't happen, and you go to another club, ask for a mentor, and a mentor will guide you through.
And you'll notice I put on the second page, there are 12 clubs in a 2-mile radius. Here, there are 50 clubs in a 5-mile radius of Mountain View here. So if you don't like the first 2, keep looking. I am actually surprised to have you say that the club was full of great speakers. Generally, a club is going to have people who are members for less than 2 years. There are certain clubs that have been around a very long time, and they'll have some more experienced members, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're great speakers. The DTM means that I've given 40 speeches for evaluation, but that could mean that I got up and barked like a seal for 20 seconds, and then my evaluation was, all you did was bark like a seal, you're a moron, you're wasting our time, we hate you, let me sign your book. Because there are no requirements that you have to meet in order to get your book signed. If you sign up for a speech, you get up here and you do the minimum necessary, you actually get through. Therefore, it's not the length of time, but how you invest yourself in the program. And you actually can do a great service to yourself by being in a club with very experienced members, provided those very experienced members are there to help you and support you. And you didn't feel that. That's an important bit of feedback to give the club, which you probably never did because you're a nice person, right? They would actually need to hear that. And if anybody hears about a similar experience with the Toastmasters Club, they need a 2x4 next to their head.
Yeah, some years ago we did have a Toastmasters club in Humanist. I don't remember what happened to it, but it was very, very interesting, and I've thought about that I'd like to go to one again. The other thing I'm very aware of is how many germs there are in the world these days, and how easily this handshaking thing. And I wonder if one couldn't do a high five or a fist bump or something else. Does it have to be a handshake?
It has to be a handshake in Toastmasters. I do know of one particular member who was real germaphobe, and he would do an elbow bump.
And that's okay?
For an well, certainly it would be okay. I just recommend always having hand sanitizer in your pocket.
Oh, good, thank you.